I grew up in the Bronx all my life, Bronx, New York, and ever since I was in middle school, I was very interested in astronomy, the study of the planets, the stars, the galaxies, our universe, basically. I was very geeky, very nerdy, and as I got older, I got caught up with my life. I went on to do other things, but during the pandemic of 2020, I was in Puerto Rico, and I took this shot of the core of the Milky Way galaxy. It was a simple 20 to 30 minute exposure of the galaxy. It didn't come out too great, but it brought up enough detail in it that made me go, yo, I want to do better with this. So what did I do? I went into YouTube. That's where everybody goes to want to learn things these days. And I learned a great deal about astrophotography for the next couple of years. Websites like Astro Backyard, Nebula Photos, and Delta Astrophotography. Great guy there, Walt, on that channel. And I learned bit by bit from all of these guys and some others as well. Peter Zelinka's another one, where I kind of learned bit by bit how to start my own astro rig. And as a result, I've been able to take quite a few amazing images right here from the Bronx under these light polluted skies. I'll leave, some examples of what I've shot in the last few years at the end of this video. My name's Ralph Perez, and this is Bronx Astro Cafe. I hope this channel helps you figure out how to do your thing in your own respective city or town. A lot of people think they have to go out in the middle of nowhere to shoot astrophotography images of nebulas and galaxies. They have to go in the, in the middle of the woods and be attacked by a bear or whatever, risk that. And not necessarily. Now, is it preferable? Yeah, it is. Nothing beats a dark sky, don't get me wrong. However, it's not practical in many cases. We all lead busy lives, we all have families, we all have things. So what I was able to do for the last few years was set up a simple astro rig, such as this one, to shoot the night sky, and using this specific rig to shoot certain images. I have a few other things I'm going to show too. But before I do that, let me make this very clear, because a lot of people don't understand this. You don't need a giant telescope that's like the size of your couch to shoot astrophotography. This is what's called wide field astrophotography, wide field imaging, in which this is all you need. A small lens, a small telescope, even a camera lens, right? You don't even need a telescope, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. So, I'm going to give you guys a rundown. Like, Ralph, this is pretty cool. How can I get started? Well, it's easy. I live in New York. Many of the websites, like High Point Scientific, OPT, which has now turned into Agenda Astro, if you go to the OPT website, I'll put these links below to these websites so you could go do some internet shopping. Even Amazon have some of this stuff. And you can find stuff here where you can slowly build your rig. I didn't buy this all in one shot. It costs a lot of money. It is an expensive hobby, but this is the minimum expensive. Like, there's a hell of a lot more expensive stuff out there, and this is as minimal as you can get with it. So you're still kind of saving some bucks and still get great shots. Again, I'll show some of those shots at the end of this video. What I have here, just to get you started, is, and then I'm going to talk about what you do, how do you get started, what are the rules. Oops. Well, the first thing you need is a camera, obviously, right? It's astrophotography for a reason. And there are different kinds of cameras for that, but the main starter camera for many astrophotographers is a simple DSLR, which many of you probably already own, okay? I'm shooting right now with a Canon T7i. This is a Canon T4i connected to this telescope. Yes, this is a telescope, this little thing. It's not a camera lens, it's a telescope. I'll get to that in a bit. Any DSLR camera that you own is good enough. That will do it. That will help you get started, okay? Even as simple as a lens. It doesn't have to be a telescope yet. You can shoot with a regular camera lens as long as you have a good amount of open sky and a good amount of wide field in your lens. Wide field means that you could really see a good portion of it to really absorb the light that is coming from the sky. I'll give you an example. This here is a very cheap lens called a Canon 50mm. A lot of photographers call it a nifty 50, and it's ideal for all different types of astronomy. But with this lens, you can take some good astrophotos of some good constellations out there in the sky, like Orion or Cassiopeia or stuff like that. This is beautiful. This is a great lens, and you can get it mad cheap. On Amazon or on the Canon website, wherever, you can go to Best Buy and get this, So this, I would recommend, if you want to start with something, start with this, or even with the kit lens your camera came with. Most Canon cameras come with a lens already connected to it, usually an 18 to 75mm that you can adjust the focal length. Focal length is how much you can zoom into something. This one is kind of like stuck at 50 mils. Not every lens does that. Some do, some don't. Since we're on the subject of camera lenses, I'm going to give you an example of the creme de la creme of what astronomers like to use as a basic camera lens, but is so freaking amazing for astrophotography. And this is this baby right here. This is the Rokinon 135mm camera lens. It is a camera lens. It looks like a telescope. It's not. The reason why it looks like a telescope is because of these rings here that I put here where I can mount this. This didn't come with this. I bought this separately from another company so that I can be able to connect to this, which I'll get to in a minute, for balancing, to make it, because this thing is heavy. This is like metal. This is some serious stuff. So this is an amazing camera lens. In some, it's called the Rokinon 135. It's also called the Samyang. It's the same exact thing. It's just a different label on it. That's all it is. I wouldn't worry about it. It costs about $400-ish, depending. Any coupons? So, the idea is that this, I was able to take some amazing shots with this. When I post my photos at the end, I'm going to show you specifically underneath which lens I used, so that you can get a taste of what this is able to shoot and what this is able to shoot and whatever else I have. By the way, this is what else I have. This here is my main scope for astrophotography. This big, it's not big, but it's big enough. This is a telescope. This is a refractor triplet telescope called the Radian 61. Okay, this baby was a lot. I saved quite a few pennies in my piggy bank. I didn't buy this again in one shot. This was, I think, the second telescope I bought, and it's an amazing piece of hardware for astrophotography, and potentially the heaviest thing I could put on this mount, which I'll get to again in a bit. It has a great focuser, and it's called triplet refractor because there are 3 pieces of glass in here. Not 2, not 1, but 3. Triplet, thus the name triplet, which helps enhance your photographs of the night sky, of the objects you are taking. In the beginning, if you want to get started on this, start with this. I would prefer you start with camera lenses like I did. Even the Rokinon, this would do it, Or even a cheap, another Canon lens a lot of people use is the 100 to 300mm, which is relatively cheap. Glass ain't that great, but they can get you some good shots. So I would recommend those too. Now the scope here is one thing. What's this little scope here? This didn't come with this. This came on its own. This I connected. What is this? Well, that goes into another level of astrophotography, which I'll probably make a video of in another day. But in a nutshell, it's a guide scope. It helps with the tracking of the night sky as it's on the mount here, and it uses this camera, which sold separately. This is a camera. This is an actual camera. There's a sensor and everything in it where you connect to the mount here, where it kind of gives corrections to make sure it stays on the object you are shooting, so that throughout the night it doesn't go off the field of view. Now you can use this on this, you can use that kind of a guide scope on pretty much any kind of telescope, any size, even a camera lens like the Rokinon 135. I've seen that. Haven't done that yet. Or have I? I might have. I don't remember. I am very, very excited to now show you the rig I have built here. And this is a rig you could start off on, right? Here, you know, just take, you know, pay good attention here. We're talking about, first of all, you need a tripod. This is a tripod. You could use any tripod to get started. It doesn't have to be this tripod specifically. As long as it's sturdy and strong, even a cheap tripod can work. But this tripod I have here is not cheap. It was a gift, and it's the same company that made this telescope, a Radian company. A Radian tripod, carbon fiber tripod, very strong. It's cool. It clicks in the mount, you know, it makes it sturdy, makes it strong, it balances it right. You know, this is something that I upgraded to from my regular tripods, which I have a couple of. So, you know, I'm not saying I'll never use those again, but again, if you want to get started in astrophotography, especially here in the Bronx, pretty much any tripod can do. It's just a matter of knowing how to connect your camera, your mount to it. Let's talk about the mount. I know people are like, what's this mount you're talking about? This white thing is called the Star Adventurer 2i. It is what's called a star tracker. It is a small version of what is normally called among astrophotographers an equatorial mount. What does that do? Well, we all know that the Earth turns, right? So the problem here is that one thing about astrophotography that you got to understand is that when you're shooting something, you have to take long exposures, 30 seconds to 3 minutes. That's what this helps with. What it does is, and if I just gently loosen the clutch here, if I have this pointed right, as the Earth is turning, this will stay on the object that I'm shooting, even though the Earth is turning. So it compensates for the Earth rotation by, over time, imagine there's a time lapse. It just keeps following it like this. It keeps following it like this, keeps following it like this. And the object stays in the field of view as opposed to drifting off, okay? Because if it drifts off, no picture, no good, right? That's what this does. It's a small version. There are better versions that have come out since I bought this one. I'm trying to save up for an upgraded version. There are versions where there's a new version of this called the Star Adventurer GTI. Came out a year or so ago, where it helps you find the object. You know, like you can program it with your phone or your iPad, and it'd be like, oh, you want to go to this nebula or this galaxy? Sure. And you'd be like, oh, snap. I didn't even have to look for it, because with this one I gotta look for it. You know, one thing about astrophotography, you gotta, if you're beginning or if you're starting with something as small as this 2i, is that, you know, it doesn't, this one doesn't have go-to capability. You have to look for the thing yourself and make sure it's centered here. You know, you can use the camera, the DSLR camera you have. Many cameras come with a flip-out screen. If I can get to it. There it is. You know, you could use the flip-out screen to kind of help find the picture, take some test shots, make sure you got your object in the center or whatever field of view that you want, and then you could do this. This particular star tracker costs about $400-ish, okay? So it's as cheap as you can go. There's another company called Ioptron, that Skyguider Pro, that is similar. It has the same kind of functionalities. I would recommend that one as well. I don't own one, but I've heard nothing but good things about it. So, you know, you could check those too. You see this red thing here? This is extra. You don't necessarily need this. I've taken more than half my shots without this. I've taken some of my shots with this. This red thing here is a computer. It's called the AIS, it's the ZWO AIS Air Pro. Okay, and it's a little computer. There are more upgraded versions of it now that are better with Wi-Fi and stuff like that. It generates its own Wi-Fi signal where you can connect to your phone or your iPad, and you can see what you're shooting on the phone or the iPad in the same way you can see it through the little screen here. What it also does is helps connect with, remember the guide camera thing I told you about? It connects to that too. There's a port there for that, where it helps you see that you are guiding right, that the thing is working, that it's making corrections and adjustments as as this is slowly tracking your object across the night sky. Now, again, this is important. You need to understand something, and I totally forgot to bring them here so I could show you examples of it. There's a couple, there's one, I think there's not one in this camera right now, but there's definitely one in the telescope. Because we are in the Bronx, because we are in a light polluted area, and there are other places, there's a astrophotographer, YouTuber who does his stuff from Tokyo, Japan, and there's another guy who does it from Chicago. That one's called Windy City Astrophotography. I think that's a cool name. And what they do is they use light pollution filters. What's a light pollution filter? It's this piece of glass or film that you can connect directly inside your camera. There are two types. A clip-on that you can stick inside without any problem to your DSLR camera, or your telescope right here in the front. As a matter of fact, I think that I might have one connected here. Let me see. No, I don't. It's all right. That's okay. There's a 2-incher that you can connect inside the radiant scope and this scope. I'm going to get to this scope in a minute. And what it does is it blocks out light polluted signals from the city. Most of out there is like sodium colored, yellowish. We've all seen it, especially growing up in the Bronx. I'm Generation X, so when those lights turned on at night, it was time to go home. You know what I speak of. Yeah, it blocks those lights out. Now, with the advent of LED street lights, it has served as a new challenge for urban astrophotographers such as myself to shoot in the city. But I'm sure they're going to be creating more filters in the future to counter that. There's already a lot of great filters. There's narrowband, which really shuts out every kind of light except the certain wavelengths that you can get from the night sky, from nebulas, from galaxies, and there are broadbands. I happen to have both versions. And there's also multi-band pass. A little bit of hydrogen gases. Universe is filled with hydrogen. You know that hydrogen, the H in front of the H2O for water? That hydrogen. It also lets in something called oxygen 3, which is a level of light that is element-based oxygen light, So I should do a lesson on the nature of light. I know quite enough to make it understandable. I'm not a scientist like that, but I know enough of it to get it. And if I get it, I'm sure you guys can get it too, because I'm not that smart. So again, let me just emphasize, you don't necessarily need this in the beginning. The bigger your telescope is, the tighter your focal length is, because an example of a wide angle telescope are these, like the Radian telescope here is a 275 millimeter. That's wide. It's not as wide as than the smaller ones, but it's wide. The Rokinon is 135 millimeters, so it's around half the amount, so you get more sky with this, but you still get good damn detail, trust me on that. Another thing, and then 50 mil, forget about it. Really open. I actually have another Rokinon that is 14 mil, which is ideal for Milky Way astrophotography. I shot that. I used that to shoot in Arizona. I went to Arizona once, and I shot there at a glamping place. And I'll put that photo at the end as well. And I used that 14 millimeter camera lens for that, using the star tracker and a DSLR camera. Very simple. The last telescope that I use for astrophotography is this. What is this? Let me take this off real quick. This here is the TPO 180. It's a 180 millimeter focal length triplet telescope, like the Radian. It's triplet. It has 3 glasses in it, and it costs around 400-ish. And again, I think this was the last telescope I've bought, and what I like about it is its size. It packs a lot of punch for a little scope like this, where you could connect it to your camera. You need to get an adapter, by the way, for all these things. The scopes, not necessarily the broken. I don't need an adapter for that, but for these little telescopes, you need to get a special adapter that fits your Canon camera sensor size. Okay, so there are 2 different types. Let me note this. The ones I have here are crop sensor. That means their sensors are a little smaller. A camera like the 60D or the 80D are, I believe, if I'm correct, and you could correct me, are full frame, which means they're a bit bigger, so therefore you can get more. I don't mind the Rebels. These are Rebel TIs or whatever. They actually help in a way with the zooming aspect of it. If you want to press in a little bit more on your target. Again, I've been able to take some amazing shots with these cameras. So yeah, this is the TPO, and it has a lovely focus ring here. And I can take one of those light pollution filters, the 2-incher ones, and screw it on in the very front of this one. I don't have to stick it in. I have to stick it inside the Raptor, which is fine, but to have to just go ding, ding, ding like that, forget about it. It works. So yeah, there it is. This is the telescope. This is my camera lens. I got the Radian, and I got Canon, and I got a couple more back there, like the 14 mil I was telling you about. How do you prep? Let's say you bought all this. Okay, Ralph, I got all this, maybe not this necessarily. Again, you don't need to. How do I get started? Well, here we go. The first thing you need to do is you need to properly plan, right? That means this. You need to plan out where you're gonna shoot and when you're gonna shoot. Those are the 2 things. Is the weather going to be good? Are the skies going to be clear? Or is it going to be cloudy? Is it going to be nasty? Is it going to be, we don't know. So you got your weather apps. You also have quite a few websites where they're good in predictability within days. A matter of I would say, give it a good 2-day window before your planning day, before your day of shoot, to see if it's still going to work out. Make sure that wherever you go, it's safe. Right? Like, I know it's Bronx Astro Cafe, and I live in a generally nice area, but, you don't want to be try to shoot this in the middle of Brook Avenue. It's bad. Another thing that you need to do in order to get started, if you're going to be shooting something, is, in advance, is pick your target. Don't pick a whole bunch of stuff. Don't be going out there like, oh, I'm going to shoot Jupiter, and then I'm going to go shoot the Orion Nebula, and then I'm going to shoot the Pleiades. No, don't do that. Choose one thing and focus on that one thing. Focus. Just focus on that one thing. And trust me, if you just work on that one thing, you're going to get better results at the end. All right? So let's say I want to shoot the Pleiades. So Pleiades is an open star cluster. I've shot it before. I'll show it a picture of it at the end. And this, this alone can do this. This is a great setup for that. Focus on that, know where it is in the sky, what time it's up in the sky. Here's another thing in planning. The higher object is in the sky, the less light pollution you have to deal with, because most of the light pollution is situated on the first quarter or 1/3 of the sky towards the horizon, because that's where it's coming from, right? It's rising from the cities and the streets. So when it's really high, it's darker there. It's better during the winter. You're freezing your butt off, but it works. Trust me, things look better in the winter. And there's a lot of cooler stuff in the winter than there is in the summer in any year anyway. Set up before dark. You see this? Set this up before it gets dark. It's harder to thimble around at night. You know, what I use and what a lot of astrophotographers use in the dark, because you still got to work on this stuff, you still got to like mess with it even after it gets dark, is, and I have it over there, it's a little headlight, like a glow lamp thing, red in color, so that way it doesn't interfere with the, you know, and you just see a red light, and that's all you need to see what you're doing. You know, make sure your things are on and everything's all set up. So you gotta, you know, it's a cool little headlamp. I'll do a video on headlamps only if you want. They're cute, they're little, they're cheap. You know, you could buy them anywhere. Here's a big thing. If you're gonna get a star tracker especially, the star tracker, it's important for this. It's called polar alignment. Okay, I'm not gonna get too big on it right now because it's kind of like a general crash course, but polar aligning, all right, you know that north state, that thing we grew up knowing called the North Star, Polaris? It's called Polaris. It's the object in the north, like, which is why it's called the North Star. And the idea is that your tracking an object in the night sky is dependent on that. Not every equatorial mount has this, you know, but I'm just going to focus on what I have here. This has a polar scope. You see this little thing right here at the end. This is a polar scope, and the other end is right through here. And the idea is that you point your tracker to the north. You use something on your phone or whatever to find where Polaris is. It's actually easy to find it. If you see the Big Dipper, we all know what the Big Dipper looks like. That last star in the handle, no, I'm sorry, my bad. The last star of the pot part. If you draw an imaginary line from that top star on the pot and go straight up in that direction, you're going to hit Polaris. You're going to see this little star and be like, oh, that's Polaris. Now, you go to that, and then you make sure that that shows up inside your polar scope, but it doesn't end there. There's a little clock-looking thing inside there where you have to position Polaris in proximity within that clock in order to get proper polar alignment. Now, if you have a phone, and like an iPhone, and there's an app I use called Polar Scope Align, and what it does is it shows you an exact duplicate of the reticle that's inside the polar scope in the star tracker. Okay, and it shows you where Polaris is supposed to be positioned in here. This helps. This is a great help. This has always helped me. And what I do is there's these little knobs here that help position. I mean, if you have to move the whole thing a little bit, fine. What's cool about this particular tripod is that there's a little latch here where I could do this. I don't even have to move the whole tripod. I just point the thing to the north direction and then bring down the latch, and it locks it into place. We're good to go. And that's another good feature about this particular tripod. Not every tripod has that. Another thing you got to know is your latitude. I live in the Bronx. The latitude from the curvature of the Earth is 40 degrees in this area. And on the tracker, in the bottom part, there's a latitude adjustment knob where you can kind of position where you're supposed to be in your relation to the latitude of where you are on Earth. It depends on how south and north you are, which is great. So that way it helps you find Polaris easier, and it helps track it at the end of it far easier. So yeah, polar aligning is essential for astrophotography, especially with a tracker like this. There are some trackers that just came out that doesn't have a polar scope, but that's when you use when you upgrade to something like the AISR Pro, or or a laptop. You don't need this. You could connect it to a laptop, and there are softwares called, like one called Nina. I heard. I have never used it. I've used this to help operate the whole thing. Another thing you got to understand while you're shooting your target is that there can be no vibrations whatsoever. In other words, if you accidentally bump into this while you're shooting, your thing is done. You're gonna have to either start from scratch or come back another day and fight. I've done it. I've screwed it up. Let me make this clear to you guys. It's always gonna be a struggle. It's always gonna be. There are going to be days when you will fail. Like, I remember driving up to Newport, not once, but twice, because it was a darker sky to shoot stuff. And not once, but twice, I drove back with nothing, because all of a sudden they were talking about it was going to be clear, and then there were clouds. So sometimes you can't control the weather, which is why proper planning is essential about the when and where of where you're going to shoot. I intend on going back to Newport at some point, because I think it's a great place to shoot where I go, and I'll make a video of it when that happens. Another thing that's good to now that I've shown you the adjustments, some of you may have wondered, what's this thing you had wrapped around this telescope? This is called a dew heater. It's a band where you wrap around. And it could be around any lens. It could be the Rokinon, it could be a camera lens, it could be the Radiant scope I have, or any scope. And what it does is, you see, over the night, frost happens. You know what I speak of, right? Like when all that wet stuff that's on your car, when you go to work in the morning, you'll be like, did it rain last night? No, it just frosted up. During the winter, there's a lot of frost. During the summer, there's a lot of dew. And what this does is it keeps the lens warm, preventing frost or dew from accumulating on your glass. Because if that happens, your shot is shot. And you don't want to throw away your shot, aka Hamilton, right? This tracker actually powers on 4 AA batteries, but there is an AC adapter where it is adaptable. If you're shooting from your house, you can thread out a power supply, and plug it into a cord. And that's what I've done over the years. What I bought recently, and I should have brought it here, I didn't think about it. I'll do another video for it, I guess. Anything I haven't done here and I didn't bring, I'm going to do another video for it. It gives me more reason to make more videos. Is a power supply. Like, it's about the size of a small shoebox, where you can have it all powered up, and it can operate, give you all the juice you need to power this thing in the middle of nowhere without feeling like you're going to lose any power. It can last all night. So I have one of those, and I'll do a video on that another time. Back to the vibrations. See this? This is called an intervalometer. This baby is your friend. And it's cheap as heck. You could get something like this for 20 bucks on Amazon. That's where I got this one. And what the idea is that you plug it, there's a intervalometer jack in most DSLRs, definitely on these two I have. You plug it into your camera, and you set up your exposure times, how many shots you're gonna take, and for how long. And you set it all up on this, and then even it has a built-in timer, so that you can have a timer, 3 seconds between each shot. It goes 3, 2, 1, and takes the other shot. Long exposures is important. It's an integral part of what you're shooting, and this is why. There's something called integration time. What does that mean? It means this. I've shot most of the things I've shot with this, and with these other lenses, is I've ranged it from 30 seconds exposure time each shot to 3 minutes each shot, because that's as much as this can take. Bigger, more expensive equatorial mounts can last a little, can last much longer than that, like 5 minutes. I've not seen more than 5 though. But the idea is that the more shots you take of your object, better your object is going to look. What does that mean? It's called integration time. I've taken, you could take pictures for 3 hours. Say, and I've done this, I've taken 3 hours worth of 1 minute shots, like 360 or 180, I think that's 3 hours, 1 minute shots of an object. And I take all those three, now this is where the computer comes in. You take those 30 shots, 180, sorry, my numbers are confused, 180 shots of 1 minute each, right? And you compress them into a process called stacking. There are many not websites, but softwares that you can get. Some you have to pay for, some free. For Windows, you guys who have Windows computers are already in the game. You can get a free software called Deep Sky Stacker. That's pretty much out of all of the ones I've seen is usually the big go-to for Windows users. I'm a Mac guy. I have 2 stacking softwares in my Mac. One called Zero, which I've not used much, and one called Affinity Photo, which I have used much because I paid for it. And if I paid for it, you bet I'm going to use it. And what it does, it takes all 180 of my 60, 1 minute long shots of, say, the Andromeda Galaxy, and it presses it and puts it into one picture. What that does is it takes away the noise that accumulates, because these are DSLR cameras. They're not used to astrophotography. There's a lot of noise and pixelation and nasty colors and crap, especially if you're in a light polluted area. In spite of the filters, you still got to deal with that to a certain extent. I know this. And what it does is helps get rid of a good portion of that to make your image look better, and it brings more detail of what you're imaging out in the final process. It's called signal to noise ratio. That's the name of that process. And there are a lot of YouTubers, astrophotography YouTubers, that are much better at shooting, at explaining what that is more than I could, I guess. Once I do that, I go to Photoshop, which is the typical photo processing creme de la creme for most photographers. And there is where I do something called stretching, a little bit of stretching, a little bit of curves adjustment, a little bit of color balance, and all that kind of stuff to really bring out more what's already there. Okay, that the picture is hiding. Photoshop is like a magical tool. It kind of just like draws it out. The same way the stacking process draws out the details more. You're gonna get a lot more detail in a nighttime object like a nebula or a galaxy if you have 60 60-second shots, 180 60-second shots compressed into one image, than you will with only 20, say, 60-second shots. You're going to get a lot more detail, and that's what you want. That's what we want as astrophotographers. We want more detail. We want more, not less. I got into this out of 2 things, out of trying to keep myself busy during a time of uncertainty during the pandemic, and out of my love for outer space. I've always loved it. It's always been a thing for me, and I want to get this channel rolling, for educational purposes. I want you guys to learn how to do this too. I want to pass this on to you guys so that you can know. Now, I know there's other guys out there that can do this too, but this is my experience. This is what Ralph goes through here in the Bronx, New York. All right? So if you guys like what you see here and you want to keep learning about all the shots that I've done and things that I'm going to do in the future here on Bronx Astrophotograhy Cafe, give me a like, and please consider subscribing to this channel. All right, especially if you're a New Yorker, or if you live in any Los Angeles, Chicago, New Orleans, whatever, Miami. We're all there. We're all living light polluted skies, and yet you can do this. You can, from where you are. You don't have to go to a dark sky shot. Do you want to? Do I want to? Heck yeah, of course I'm going to. But for now, I could shoot from around here, and I can give you some of the stuff I'm going to show you right now at the end of this video. I'm going to leave links below. I have a couple other channels that are not related to this, that if you want to check out what else I do on YouTube. And until next time, this is Ralph Bronx from Bronx Astro Cafe. Clear skies.